As of 2025, there's been thousands of people who have circumnavigated the world. This includes either walking, flying, or sailing. And many of these people achieve this with stops here and there and having either a crew or someone else going with them. But very few dare to try this feat alone and with no stops. But one of these brave souls was Jur Sturk, a Slovenian man born in 1937. Now, it's not known what actually got him into sailing, as Yugoslavia had a very narrow coastline, and his family weren't really sailors, but by a young age he fell in love with the idea of sailing. Although his profession was being an electrical engineer, but when Yugoslavia's borders opened more in the 1970s and 80s, he started to live out his dream in sailing in the open water. As he went on a few expeditions, he sailed to the Mediterranean and then to the Atlantic. But one of his biggest accomplishments would happen in the early 1990s, where he would actually circumnavigate the world. He sailed a 6.5 meter or 21 foot sailboat that he actually built himself, with making multiple stops along the way. Now, this would be a big deal in Slovenia because, well, no one from that country has ever actually done that. But he wasn't finished. His next goal was to become the oldest person to sail around the world alone, without stops and without engine power, all in a boat he built himself. By 2007, he was well into his 70s, and this would be the time he would decide to try to circumnavigate the world again. He set out from Tauranga, New Zealand in December 2007, sailing westward, but he wasn't stupid. This would be a very challenging feat to accomplish and an incredibly dangerous one. So he remained in contact through high-frequency radio, regularly speaking with other sailors and amateur radio operators around the world. He provided updates on his position, weather conditions, and general status. Those who spoke to him noted his calm tone and precise observations. He seemed focused, experienced, and very comfortable being alone at sea. Throughout 2008, he made steady progress. He crossed the Indian Ocean, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and made his way across the Atlantic, and would pass Cape Horn. He was completing the route, and as 2009 approached, he was on his way back through the Indian Ocean, heading home. Everything seemed fine and okay, until it came to January 1st in 2009. He was approximately 1,000 nautical miles off the western coast of Australia, sailing northeast. Like every few days, he would be in contact with someone, and in this call, he mentioned that everything was fine, and that he intended to clean the rudder soon. He gave no indication of distress, fatigue, or technical issues. Then, all communication stopped. This would be the final call he would ever make. At first, it wasn't seen as unusual because solar sailors often pass through stretches of poor reception, or they just want to conserve battery power. But as days became weeks, concern would grow. Other sailors and radio operators attempted to contact, but no response came, and there was no emergency beacons activated, or no distress signals. No one knew what was going on. Weeks had passed with still no response. Until, on January 26, 2009, a merchant ship spotted a ship adrift in the Indian Ocean with the sails torn and flapping. The vessel looked abandoned and no one was seen on board, so not surprising, no attempts were made to tow or board the vessel at that time. And it continued drifting, but on the back of the ship there was a plate, and it said Lieutenant. This was Jur Sturk's ship, but where was he? Then, on April 30th, 2009, over 3 months later, the same abandoned ship with the plate Lieutenant was found again, this time by the research ship RV Roger Revel west of Australia. The crew boarded the yacht to assess its conditions and search for signs of life. Inside, they found no one. Sturk was gone, and there was no signs of a struggle, damage, or sabotage. The boat was intact and still floating. The sails were tattered, and the forestay, a crucial part of the rigging, had snapped. But below deck was dry and in good order. And not only that, Sturk's belongings were still there and also intact. Charts, books, and bedding. And most notably, his logbook. The final entry in the log was dated January 2nd, 2009, just 1 day after his last known radio communication. It contained standard notes on the weather and location. Nothing unusual, no distress, and no hint that anything was wrong. So what the hell happened? Where was Sturk? Well, no one really knows. But after examining the boat, those involved concluded that Sturk had likely fallen overboard during a routine task. perhaps while adjusting the sails or inspecting the rudder as he planned. The sea in that part of the Indian Ocean is unpredictable. A sudden swell or misstep can easily cause a solar sailor to lose balance. So as he fell in the ocean, he would have likely tried to swim back to the boat to only realize it was impossible to catch. So either from exhaustion or him accepting his fate, he would have most likely have drowned. This, of course, is the most optimistic possibility, as another could have been him being eaten alive by sharks. To support this theory of him falling into the water, his personal locator beacon was never triggered, and no life raft was missing. There was no indication that he had left the boat intentionally. Obviously, no body was found and probably won't ever be because he was lost in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Jur Sturk was declared lost at sea in 2009. The precise details of what actually happened to him will never be fully known, but the evidence does point toward him being lost at sea, even though it is kinda creepy to think there might be other possibilities at play. But with no solid evidence, I'm going to conclude he drowned at sea after falling off his boat. On March 17th, 2025, at exactly 3:04 p.m., an SOS message was transmitted from an Apple device via satellite to emergency dispatchers in Dutchess County, Oregon. The message included a precise GPS location that read, "Trapped and injured person in steep terrain." The signal came from the west side of Mount Bachelor, a popular ski destination known for its steep snow and sprawling tree-lined slopes. Whether triggered by crash detection or manually activated under duress, the message launched an urgent rescue effort. Emergency coordination began immediately. The Mount Bachelor Ski Patrol was dispatched first, racing across snowy ridgelines and tight tree paths to reach the coordinates. Simultaneously, the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office, search and rescue teams, and AirLink helicopter medics began organizing support from both air and ground. Dispatchers were able to contact someone at the scene, likely a skiing companion who had already begun trying to free the trapped individual and was given real-time updates to 911 operators. When responders reached the site, they found a patch of dense forest off the edge of a skiable slope. Near the base of a tall evergreen, a small section of ski gear was barely visible above the snow. The rest was buried. Benjamin Shelkey, a 34-year-old skier from Seattle, had fallen into what appeared to be a tree well, an invisible trap created by loose snow at the base of large conifers. He was found head first, with only his lower legs and boots visible above the snow line. His upper body had disappeared into a tight, downward funnel of powder. Earlier that morning, Benjamin had set out for a ski trip in the mountains with at least one other person. Mount Bachelor, which is the mountain that he was skiing on, is located in Central Oregon, and it had just received a fresh dump of snow, actually over 3 feet in just a couple of days. For skiers like Benjamin, this kind of day was actually perfect for exploring the more remote areas of the resort tree runs, steep terrain, and untouched powder. By the early afternoon, Benjamin and at least one companion were skiing the west side of Mount Bachelor, which is a less traffic zone known for its trees, tight glades, and rolling drops, but far enough out that rescue access could take time. Around this area, large trees aline the slopes, perfect spots for soft powder to gather, but beneath those trees lay a hidden danger. Tree wells, loose pockets of snow that accumulate around the base of tree trunks, invisible from above and nearly impossible to escape from once fallen in. At some point while navigating this terrain, Benjamin likely made a turn too close to one of the larger trees or hit a soft patch of snow. Whether it was a fall, a misjudged line, or just terrible luck, he dropped into a tree well head first. The powder immediately began to collapse around him, locking his arms and chest in place. Snow would press against his face, and the more he moved, the tighter it packed. And then, moments later, the SOS message was transmitted from one of Benjamin's Apple devices. The companion had already been digging for over 15 minutes. The snow was dry and fluffy on the surface, but denser and heavier below, making excavation slow and difficult. Rescuers took over immediately. They carefully removed the snow from around Benjamin's helmet, neck, and shoulders, working with urgency while trying not to collapse the surrounding layers. Tree wells are unstable. Every handful of snow removed risks another collapse. Once they reached his face, they saw the horrifying reality. Benjamin was unresponsive. His mouth and nose had been packed tightly with snow, and the surrounding powder had frozen against his skin. Keep in mind there was no air pockets. His arms were trapped against his chest, unable to move. The initial signs pointed to snow immersion, one of the most silent and suffocating threats a skier can face. CPR began immediately on the scene. Chest compressions, rescue breaths, and emergency assessment protocols were carried out as snow continued to fall into the hole they dug. The cold was biting, the terrain uneven, and every second counted. Despite the effort, Benjamin remained motionless. Although he was transported by Airlink helicopters to the Mount Bachelor clinic, where medical staff continued attempts to resuscitate him. But after all interventions were tried, he was declared deceased. The official cause of death was snow immersion suffocation, more technically referred to as non-avalanche related snow immersion death. This occurs when a person is trapped in deep, unconsolidated snow, most often head first, and is unable to free themselves. Tree cells are the primary source of these incidents. Falling into one means falling straight down with skis, poles, and arms getting wedged awkwardly, and unfortunately this fate would befall Benjamin. The sun bore down heavily that afternoon on the Mississippi River Delta, where warm air hung thick with humidity and the dark waters sloshed lazily against the sides of a small pilot boat. It was July 1st, 1879, and 10-year-old Gus Eriksson, a Swedish-born boy, stood aboard the vessel with several other passengers and crew. Gus had likely come to the United States not long before. He was the son of Erik Eriksson, immigrants from Sweden. For reasons lost to time, the boy had found himself aboard a small boat operated near the mouth of the Mississippi, where it meets the Gulf of Mexico. Whether he was simply traveling with others or assisting the crew, no one can say for sure. But what is known is that sometime that afternoon, the boat capsized. In the chaos, passengers and crew were thrown into the water. Screams cut across the river bank, and wooden planks slapped into the current as the vessel flipped over. Gus, like the others, was plunged beneath the surface, although he managed to resurface and cling to the life buoy. The crude float was just large enough to keep him above water, and for a time it seemed as though everything would be fine. The muddy current was strong, but Gus was staying afloat, drifting amid the wreckage of the boat and trying to stay calm. Witnesses on a nearby vessel saw him in the water, invisible and stable, calling out for help. But the Mississippi's mouth is a dangerous place. Its water a swirling mix of salt and fresh water, deep and warm, teeming with life both seen and unseen. Suddenly, the calm was broken. From beneath the surface, a shadow approached. Fast and purposeful, it circled once, perhaps curious at first, but then charged with terrifying speed. No one could stop it. With incredible force, the predator exploded from below, smashing through the surface and biting down on Gus's lower body. His scream was brief, high-pitched, and silenced almost immediately. The animal was a tiger shark, likely between 8 and 12 feet long, although we don't know for certain as this was over a century ago. Although we do know a tiger shark's jaw is powerful enough to split bone with ease, and in one single bite, it crushed the boy's right leg and lower torso. Gus was dragged under the water, still partially clinging to the life buoy, which quickly turned red as his blood spilled into the river. Witnesses described seeing the water erupt as if a cannon had been fired from below. There was a swirl of red and white foam followed by flailing limbs and the rapid whipping of a tail slicing through the surface. One man shouted that he saw the boy go under and then reappear, but only for a moment. What was left of him was motionless. There was no second chance. The shark thrashed violently with its prey, tearing at the body until it was unrecognizable. A 12-inch wide chunk of flesh was reportedly torn from Gus's right leg, but by the time anyone could get close enough to intervene, it was far too late. The boy, torn loose, floated empty. By the time rescuers reached the scene, which we don't know actually how long it took for them to get there, but when they did, Gus was gone. His body had vanished beneath the water, likely taken fully by the shark or swept away by the river's relentless current. The others aboard the boat were rescued, and some injuries were reported from the capsizing, but none came close to what happened to the boy. There was no body to recover, no burial, only blood in the water and stunned silence among the men who had witnessed it. Reports of the incident would spread through local towns and shipping communities, gaining traction due to the sheer horror of the attack. Shark sightings in the Mississippi were rare but not unheard of. Scientists later confirmed that tiger sharks are fully capable of traveling into brackish river mouths. Especially in search of prey. Most people believe sharks only pose a threat in open ocean. Gus's death shattered that assumption. The story was picked up in maritime records and later entered into shark attack registries. Modern database lists it as a confirmed fatal shark attack, one of the few 19th century deaths of its kind recorded in US waters. Several accounts note that the attack occurred while the boy was floating on a life buoy after a boat capsized, emphasizing the helplessness of the victim and the sudden brutal nature of the predator's strike. In retrospect, it is not difficult to understand how it happened. The Gulf of Mexico's waters near the Mississippi's mouth are warm, nutrient-rich, and draw all manner of marine life. And tiger sharks, known for their aggression and lack of dietary discrimination, patrol these areas often. A struggling human in the water may have appeared similar to an injured animal, or an easy target.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.